On MSNBC, Stephanie Ruhle had on Stephen Cloobeck, who is a Democratic donor and the chairman and CEO of Diamond Resorts, a Las Vegas-based timeshare company. Now, I'm going to show you the interview here in two different parts, and sometimes there are videos that are just incredible. Now, this interview exposes everything wrong with the political system. But the amazing part about it is that the two people involved in the interview, both Stephanie Ruhle and Stephen Cloobeck, don't realize that they're exposing the issue with the Democratic Party and the political system in general. So I got to give you a sort of a trigger warning here, because if you're not a millionaire or a billionaire, you will likely get angry watching this interview. I got angry watching this interview. And it was a sort of anger where it was just like, wow, he's really saying that. And wow, she is really terrible at asking the right questions. So I'm going to show you the first part here and just get ready.
And when Democrats continue to say, down with the billionaires, we can't stand the rich, a lot of people want to be rich. So is it the right message that the Democrats are going with?
It's so effing wrong.
Whoa.
I've talked to Schumer. I've talked to Wyden. I've talked to Pelosi.
And said what?
And I said, if you use the term billion again, I'm done.
Why?
Because it's aspirational. I didn't start with anything. Just penalize everyone that's done well. We all want to do well. And we should be the party of doing well. We should be a party of business and leadership. And it is very, very disturbing when I hear the millionaire or billionaire word. And I've told them to stop it, knock it off. Because everyone wants to do really well. And this is the world of aspirations.
Then are you worried that the Democratic Party is going too far to the left?
So much so, it drives me nuts. So much so, it would make me quit the party. And I've made it very clear, I'll cut your money off. And others will do the same. We've had enough.
Okay.
We need a new brand.
Okay, so how did you enjoy that? Now, I want to frame this properly. I think Stephen Cloobeck, as a millionaire, feels like he's being personally attacked when people like Bernie Sanders talks about income inequality and the millionaires and the billionaires. But we're not attacking rich people. The problem is the system. The system is broken. All the benefits, all the gains go to the top. That's not because people at the top are working the hardest. That's because the system is rigged in their favor. Just yesterday, I covered a story about the Paradise Papers, showing how millionaires and billionaires around the world are putting their money in tax havens. Do you, at home, making maybe 30 grand a year, are you putting your money in a tax haven? No, probably not, because you don't have access to that sort of thing. Whereas these people at the top who have all the power and all the money do have access to that. They're able to get these loopholes and essentially hire people to figure out how to make them as much money as possible and how to prevent themselves from paying taxes as much as possible. That's a systemic issue. That isn't an issue with the billionaires. A lot of people, especially when it comes to corporations, they're designed to make more money. That's capitalism. That's why you need rules in place to be able to pull the strings in a way where the corporations can't just rule the country, which kind of is already happening. But that's the problem. There aren't enough regulations in place to ensure that these corporations and the rich are paying their fair share of taxes, because the rest of us are. Yet we're getting screwed because the wealthy aren't. Now, I want to highlight some of the quotes said here and just try to understand what's going on. So, Stephanie Ruhle started with, quote, "A lot of people want to be rich, So is it the right message that Democrats are going with? This is a Republican argument. The idea that people aspire to be rich, so we shouldn't talk bad about the rich. Well, again, we're not talking bad about the rich. It's a broken system. But the majority of people, the vast majority of people, are not rich. So discussing rich in a negative light and how all the gains go to the top, no, that's not going to affect the Democratic Party in a negative way strategically. Because most people, most voters are not rich people. So if you're going to lose voters because of the rich, because of the anti-rich message, you're going to lose 1% of people, if not less. The top 1%, 0.01%. So it doesn't matter if that's the message. That's not going to negatively affect. And if anything, we've seen how it's benefited Bernie Sanders and other politicians who are adopting that message. Now, let's go to another quote here. Oh, this one. This is from Stephen Cloobeck. Quote, "I've talked to Schumer, Wyden, Pelosi. Have you, person at home making minimum wage, have you personally talked to Schumer, Pelosi, your senator? Are you able to get that sort of access? No, because you're not rich. That's what's wrong with this system. Rich people have access to the politicians in power. And when you have access, when you have the ear of these powerful politicians, guess what? You have the power. The rich person has the power. Who are they listening to? Who's Pelosi listening to? Is she listening to the guy making $13 an hour or $8 an hour bartending? No. She's listening to Stephen Cloobeck and other rich people who are giving them millions of dollars. That's a rigged system. That's a broken system. You have to acknowledge, no matter how much money you have, that you simply having that money gives you a benefit when it comes to politics, because you're able to talk to people like Schumer and Pelosi, whereas the average person can't. And it just completely exposes it, and he doesn't even realize it. This is something that I tend to disagree with a lot of progressives on. A lot of people think that these rich people or these politicians are knowingly rigging the system, that they're fully aware that they're screwing poor people, but they're not. Stephen Cloobeck here is out in the open saying, I've talked to these people. He's openly saying, I will cut off their money. This is a guy that is stuck in his bubble. He doesn't even think that other people don't have that access. He doesn't even acknowledge it, because that's his world. His world is lots of money, and I get to talk to politicians and affect policy. And he thinks that's okay, because that's his world. So he's not knowingly screwing people. He's just part of this broken system where he's gotten used to these benefits. Another quote here. This is another one from Stephen Cloobeck. If you use the term billionaires again, I'm done, because it's aspirational. So I kind of covered that, but yeah, next quote. I didn't start with anything. Just penalize everyone that does well. We all want to do well. Okay, so I'm going to get to that part in a minute here after I show the next clip. But just because there are some people that are able to go from rags to riches, doesn't mean that everybody has that same opportunity. And I'm going to show you some data later in the video that shows that America is abnormal in the sense where it's actually a place where if you have wealth already, then you are likely to keep that wealth. And if you're poor, you are most likely to stay poor. Whereas other countries have a little more leeway in terms of being able to move from middle class to rich or from poor to middle class. But America is almost unique in its ability to really rig the system against anybody moving out of their place in society in terms of what kind of family they were born into. Looking for another quote here. It's very disturbing when I hear the millionaire or billionaire word. Snowflake. Last quote here. I made it very clear. I'll cut your money off and others will do the same. So yeah, I touched on that already, but that's the problem. That kind of threat works on people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer because they're so addicted to that money and to using that money for their campaigns without realizing, wait a second, Bernie Sanders almost became the Democratic nominee without any of that money. So if the Democratic Party turns their back on these billionaires and these big donors who don't want the Democratic Party to go more progressive, then they'll be fine. They will grow. The Democratic Party continues to lose seats. And that's in a system where they are giving all the benefits to the rich. So maybe it's time to change strategy and actually try to speak to the average person and not just the donor class. Okay, let's go to... Oh yeah, I have to touch on just that Stephanie Ruhle doesn't at all question, don't you think that's a broken system? That you as a rich person can have access to these politicians where the average person can't? Stephanie Ruhle doesn't bring that up. You know why? Because she's also rich. She's also part of this broken system. She also benefits from everything that Stephen Cloobeck, that's his name? Yeah, benefits from. So that's why MSNBC and cable news in general is not a good gauge of where the country is and what the discussions should be on policy, because the people that are telling you the news are in the upper class and benefiting from the system the way it currently is. Now let's get to the second clip, where it's more fun. And I don't really mean that in a positive way.
And what is that brand? Because right now there is an opportunity. If Democrats lose, for example, in the state of Virginia, if that isn't a wake-up call that the Democratic leadership needs to get together and say, we've got to find a middle ground. Because if the Democrats continue to go far to the left, you've got that whole group in the center that aren't going to go the way of Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. And then you're going to fracture the party even more.
It's fractured. It's broken. We need a new brand. It needs to be simple. Keep it simple. Tax reform, keep it simple. Infrastructure, no bumps in the road. What more do we have to say? They need to have a new brand created.
Is the Democratic Party in worse shape than Republicans?
They're both insane.
But at the end of the day, like them or not, as I said earlier, there's a lot of people that don't like President Trump, but then they showed and voted Republican. Are we going to see Democrats pull it together and vote together? A lot of Bernie supporters did not turn and vote for Hillary. They just didn't vote at all.
I know, and I can tell you that if we go far left, I'm out. I'm out. We need middle ground.
So when you tell the Democratic leadership this, when you meet with Wyden and Pelosi and Schumer, what do they say to you?
Well, so far they've given me great signals that they're willing to participate and get there. We shall see. We shall see.
All right. Good Lord. So Stephanie Ruhle starts off with this question, or this quote. If Democrats continue to go far to the left, you've got that whole group of Democrats that aren't going to go the way of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. This is one of the biggest myths in New York and Washington, that there is this massive middle ground. All these voters in the center who want the Democratic Party to be this moderate right-wing party. No, that doesn't exist. And you think that because those are the circles that you are in. Your rich circles think that. That's why you think there's this whole massive middle ground of all these people who want lower taxes for the rich. Let me show you the actual stats. So this is a Gallup poll from April 5th to 9th in 2017, asking Please tell me if you think these groups are paying their fair share in federal taxes, or paying too much or paying too little. So this is all voters. This is not just Democrats. This is polling all voters. And when all voters are polled, 63% of people think that upper income people pay too little in taxes. And 67% of people think that corporations pay too little in taxes. But you don't see those stats on MSNBC, do you? Because they don't actually want to show you the polling on specific policy. Because practically every policy polls progressive. And if they showed you that, then you may realize there are other people like you. Just like what Bernie Sanders' campaign showed. There are all these people who now found a voice in Bernie Sanders because he spoke to the policies that a lot of people want to see that haven't been represented on the national level. But MSNBC and these millionaires and billionaires want to keep telling you that most people don't want high taxes on the rich, don't want higher taxes on corporations, when in fact they do. And not just Democrats. Everybody. So, two other quotes here I want to pull out of that clip. From Cloobeck here, quote, "If we go far left, I'm out. I'm out. We need middle ground." Good. Bye. Go away. We're really going to miss your single vote and all the money that is affecting the policies that are negatively affecting the rest of us. Why would we want you in the party if you're going to keep continuing to bring the party to the right wing? Who wants that? Voters don't want that. I just showed you. So, bye. Go. Last quote here. "So far, the leadership have given me great symbols." That's Stephen Cloobeck talking about him talking to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. They've given him great symbols, that they are in fact listening to him. That's not what we want to hear. But it does explain their behavior on television and the things they say, and their inability to support things like Medicare for all and other progressive policies. Now, I want to get a little more into, man, there's so much I'd like to cover here, but I may not cover all of it. But just the economic inequality in the US. So this has been covered in a few different, or many different articles, but I'm going to highlight a couple here, showing you that, yes, in fact, the American system is broken and favors the rich. So here's an article from Scientific American from 2015 called "Economic Inequality is Far Worse Than You Think." And here's a quote from that article. In their 2011 paper, Michael Norton and Dan O'Reilly analyzed beliefs about wealth inequality. The average American believes that the richest fifth owns 59% of the wealth, and that the bottom 40% own 9%. The reality is strikingly different. The top 20% of U.S. households own more than 84% of the wealth, and the bottom 40% combined for a paltry 0.3%. The Walton family, for example, has more wealth than 42% of American families combined. And here's a graph to show that disparity of what people think the distribution is between the rich and everybody else, and what it actually is. So the graph at the top shows you what it actually is. How the top 20% of people own more than 84% of the wealth. Whereas, and then everybody else is fighting over the scraps. Even though Americans think that it's better for them, because that's how it's told to them in media. They don't think it's as bad as it actually is. But the reality is that, yes, it's terrible. The wealthy own even more than most people can imagine. But as Stephen Cloobeck said, can't you just, be poor and then work really hard and then become rich? Doesn't that happen like all the time? Well, here's an article in the New York Times called "Harder for Americans to Rise from Lower Rungs." And here's what they say. Benjamin Franklin did it, Henry Ford did it, and American life is built on the faith that others can do it too. Rise from humble origins to economic heights. But many researchers have reached a conclusion that turns conventional wisdom on its head. Americans enjoy less economic mobility than their peers in Canada and much of Western Europe. One reason for the mobility gap may be the depth of American poverty, which leaves poor children starting especially far behind. Another may be the unusually large premiums that American employers pay for college degrees. The United States maintains a thinner safety net than other rich countries, leaving more children vulnerable to debilitating hardships. The US also has uniquely high incarceration rates and a longer history of racial stratification than its peers. The United States is also less unionized than many of its peers, which may lower wages among the least skilled, and has public health problems like obesity and diabetes, which can limit education and employment. So there is really so much to touch on just there, but I want to just talk about the last part there, how the US has a public health problem like obesity and diabetes. Now, a reason why obesity and diabetes is so prevalent in the US is largely because of a lack of access to healthcare. So when you have Medicare for all, you're actually able to prevent a lot of the more serious health issues that affect the US. And it allows you, as a person who now has free healthcare, to go see a doctor earlier and prevent those issues and not wait till it gets to the worst possible outcome, which in many cases is diabetes. Now, just to end on here, I want to just reference something that Cloobeck said in the clip.
I know, and I can tell you that if we go far left, I'm out. I'm out.
Well, it reminds me of a Ludacris song from the early 2000s. And it goes something like this. Move, bitch. Get out the way. Get out the way, bitch. Get out the way.